A peaceful church ceremony turns into something far darker when a powerful husband thinks he can silence his pregnant wife with a single punch in front of 500 witnesses. He believes no one will stop him. He believes his money makes him untouchable. He believes his pregnant wife will never fight back. But what he doesn't know is that the woman who walks through those cathedral doors next is the one person who can tear his entire world apart. A mother who was ripped away from her daughter 30 years ago. A mother who has been collecting evidence ever since. A mother who has been waiting for this exact moment. And from that brutal punch, caught on camera and seen by millions, a billionaire becomes a fugitive. An empire built on lies begins to crumble, and secrets buried for decades finally claw their way to the surface. But here's what makes this story different. Just when you think Emma is safe, everything falls apart. Just when you think that monster is defeated, he strikes back harder. There are twists in this story that will make you gasp out loud. There are moments that will break your heart. And there is an ending that will stay with you for days. This is a story of fierce survival, a mother's love that spans 30 years, and justice that hits harder than anything Lucas Harrington ever delivered. Stay with me until the end, because the biggest twist, you won't see it coming. Let's begin. The chandeliers inside St. Paul's Cathedral cast a warm golden glow across 500 guests dressed in their finest evening wear. Crystal teardrops caught the light and scattered rainbows across marble floors that had witnessed weddings, funerals, and baptisms for over a century. Tonight, they would witness something far darker, something that would make national headlines within hours and change multiple lives forever. Emma Harrington stood near the elevated podium, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. At 7 months pregnant, she felt the familiar pressure beneath her ribs that made breathing difficult in crowded spaces. Her pale blue maternity dress had cost more than most people's monthly rent, and the pearl earrings dangling from her lobes caught the light every time she turned her head. To the assembled donors, board members, and socialites filling the wooden pews, she looked like the picture of privileged grace. No one could see the fear coiling in her stomach like a living thing. Her husband, Lucas Harrington, stood 3 feet behind her, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with the scotch he'd been drinking since noon. His navy suit was tailored to perfection, his salt and pepper hair swept back from a face that belonged on magazine covers. At 38 years old, Lucas had built an empire on charm, inherited wealth, and a complete absence of conscience. His smile could convince anyone of anything. Emma knew what lived behind that smile. An elderly socialite in the third row leaned toward her companion and whispered loudly enough for several people to hear. "That Emma is absolutely glowing. I looked like a beached whale when I was pregnant with my first." Her friend patted her arm sympathetically. "Money helps, dear. Money and good lighting." Scattered chuckles rippled through nearby guests. Emma barely registered them. She was too focused on the tightness in her chest and the growing certainty that something terrible was about to happen. The host of the evening, a silver-haired man with a radio announcer's voice, stepped aside and gestured toward Emma with a flourish. "And now, to share a few words of gratitude on behalf of the Harrington Foundation, please welcome Mommy and Emma Harrington." Polite applause filled the sanctuary. Emma felt Lucas's hand press against her lower back, propelling her forward. The pressure of his fingers sent a clear message. "Do not embarrass me." She approached the microphone on unsteady legs. Her prepared remarks sat on the podium, but the words blurred together as another wave of dizziness washed over her. The baby shifted inside her, pressing against her bladder and her lungs simultaneously. She gripped the edges of the podium and forced herself to breathe. "Good evening," she began, her voice wavering slightly. "On behalf of my husband and the entire Harrington Foundation, I want to thank each of you for your extraordinary generosity this past decade." She paused to swallow. Her mouth felt impossibly dry. "Your contributions have funded scholarships, built community centers, and provided meals for thousands of families in need." Another pause, longer this time. Stars flickered at the edges of her vision, and she felt sweat breaking out along her hairline despite the cathedral's cool air conditioning. Lucas noticed. She saw his expression shift from practiced warmth to cold irritation. He stepped forward, wrapping his arm around her waist in a gesture that looked supportive from a distance. Up close, his fingers dug into her flesh like talons. "Finish the speech," he hissed through clenched teeth. His breath was hot against her ear, sharp with alcohol. 3 more sentences. Do not make me look like a fool. Emma tried. She really tried. Her lips parted, and she drew breath to continue, but the words dissolved before they could form. The room tilted sideways. She heard concerned murmurs spreading through the crowd like ripples in still water. Is she all right? Poor thing looks ready to faint. Someone should help her. Lucas's grip tightened until Emma was certain she would have bruises tomorrow. His voice dropped even lower, vibrating with barely contained rage. I said finish. But Emma's body had reached its limit. Her knees buckled slightly, and she grabbed the microphone stand for support. The screech of feedback echoed through the cathedral, making several guests wince. I'm sorry, she whispered. I need to sit down. She tried to step away from the podium, tried to preserve whatever dignity remained. But Lucas blocked her path, his face twisted into an expression she knew all too well. The mask of the charming philanthropist had cracked, revealing the monster underneath. 500 pairs of eyes watched what happened next. Lucas Harrington, beloved benefactor, respected businessman, pillar of the community, drew back his fist and drove it into his pregnant wife's face with enough force to lift her feet off the ground. The sound echoed through the cathedral like a thunderclap. Emma's head snapped sideways. Her body twisted in midair for one horrible suspended moment before she crashed onto the marble steps leading to the altar. The thud of her impact silenced every voice in the sanctuary. Emma lay crumpled on the cold stone, her hand clutching her belly as agony tore through her abdomen. The baby was moving violently inside her, responding to the trauma with frantic kicks that felt like panicked screaming. Blood trickled from her split lip onto the pristine marble. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Lucas shouting, Nobody move. Nobody interfere. This is a family matter. But 500 witnesses had just watched a man assault his pregnant wife. The silence lasted only seconds before chaos erupted. Screaming, chairs scraping against stone, the clatter of dropped phones being fumbled by shaking hands. Someone was calling for an ambulance. Someone else was yelling at Lucas. Emma tried to move, but her body refused to cooperate. The pain in her abdomen was getting worse, not better. Deep, cramping waves that suggested something was very wrong. She thought of her baby, her innocent child who had done nothing to deserve this, and tears streamed down her bruised cheeks. This is it, she thought. This is how it ends. He finally went too far, and now my baby will pay the price. Her vision began to fade. The cathedral lights blurred into smears of gold and shadow. She heard her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, then the fainter flutter of another heartbeat beneath her ribs. Her baby, still alive, still fighting. Through the encroaching darkness, Emma heard a sound that cut through the chaos. The massive wooden doors at the far end of the cathedral swung open with a groan of ancient hinges. A woman stepped inside. Emma's fading vision could only make out impressions. Silver hair swept back from a strong face. Tall posture that commanded attention despite the chaos. Eyes that locked onto Emma's crumpled form with an intensity that seemed to stop time itself. The woman walked forward through the panicked crowd with the calm certainty of someone who had waited decades for this moment. People stepped aside without being asked, parting before her like water before the bow of a ship. Lucas turned to face the newcomer, his face flushed with rage and adrenaline. Who the hell are you? The silver-haired woman did not answer him. She walked past him as if he were invisible and knelt beside Emma on the cold marble steps. Her hand, warm and steady, pressed against Emma's forehead. I'm here now, the woman whispered. Her voice cracked with 30 years of grief and longing. I'm finally here. Emma tried to focus on the stranger's face. Something about it tugged at memories buried so deep she had forgotten they existed. A warmth, a safety, a love she had not felt since childhood. Who? Emma managed to whisper before darkness claimed her completely. The last thing she heard before losing consciousness was the woman's voice, thick with tears. I'm your mother, Emma, and I'm never leaving you again. The ambulance ride passed in fragments of consciousness, flashing lights painting red and blue shadows across Emma's closed eyelids. The urgent voices of paramedics calling out numbers and medical terms. The steady beep of monitors tracking her heartbeat and, more importantly, her baby's heartbeat. Fetal heart rate is unstable. We need to move fast. Emma surfaced briefly when they lifted her stretcher out of the ambulance. Bright hospital lights assaulted her eyes. She glimpsed Lucas pushing through the emergency room doors behind her, his face arranged into an expression of concerned husband that made her stomach turn. Then the silver-haired woman was there, walking beside her stretcher, holding her hand with fierce gentleness. "Stay with us, Emma. Your baby needs you to stay with us." Emma clung to that voice like a lifeline as the medical team rushed her into an examination room. Dr. Patricia Coleman, a no-nonsense OBGYN with reading glasses perpetually perched on her head, took charge immediately. "I need an ultrasound now. Someone get the husband out of my exam room. Only immediate family allowed." A young nurse glanced nervously at Lucas. "Dr. Coleman, that is Lucas Harrington, the donor. His name is on the new pediatric wing." Dr. Coleman did not look up from her examination of Emma's abdomen. "I don't care if his name is on the moon. My patient needs calm and quiet. Out." Lucas opened his mouth to argue, but two security guards appeared at his elbows. "Hospital policy, sir. You can wait in the family room." The door closed behind him, and Emma felt something loosen in her chest. For the first time in 7 years of marriage, she was in a room where Lucas could not reach her. The silver-haired woman remained at her bedside, still holding her hand. Dr. Coleman glanced up briefly. "And you are?" The woman hesitated for only a moment. "Her mother." Emma's eyes flew open despite the pain. "What?" Dr. Coleman raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She was too focused on the ultrasound images appearing on her screen. "All right, Mama, let's see how your little one is doing." The next several minutes stretched into eternity. Emma watched Dr. Coleman's face for any sign of bad news, her heart hammering against her ribs. The baby had stopped moving so violently, which could mean recovery or something far worse. Finally, Dr. Coleman let out a long breath. "Baby looks okay. Heartbeat is stabilizing. No signs of placental abruption." She fixed Emma with a stern look. "You got lucky. A fall like that, at 7 months pregnant, could have been catastrophic." "She fell," the silver-haired woman said flatly. Her tone made clear she did not believe that explanation for a second. Dr. Coleman met her eyes. "I've been delivering babies for 30 years. I know the difference between fall injuries and fist injuries." She turned back to Emma with surprising gentleness. "When you're ready to tell me what really happened, I'm here to listen and to document." Emma said nothing. 7 years of conditioning kept the truth locked behind her teeth. Even now, even after what Lucas had done in front of 500 witnesses, some part of her was terrified of the consequences of speaking. The silver-haired woman squeezed her hand. "It's okay. You don't have to say anything yet, but you should know something first." Emma looked at her properly for the first time since regaining consciousness. The woman's face was lined with age but still beautiful. Her eyes were a striking blue-green that seemed hauntingly familiar. "My name is Mary Fitzgerald," the woman said. "And despite what you've been told your entire life, I never abandoned you." Emma's breath caught. "That's impossible. My mother left when I was 2. She didn't want me. Lucas said his father tracked her down years ago and she refused to see me." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "That's the story they told you. It's not the truth." Over the next hour, as Emma lay in her hospital bed with monitors tracking her vital signs and her baby's heartbeat, Mary revealed a history that rewrote everything Emma thought she knew about her own life. Mary had not abandoned her daughter. She had been forced out through a calculated campaign of manipulation, forged legal documents, and outright threats. Lucas's father, Harrison Harrington Sr., had orchestrated the entire thing when Emma was barely old enough to form memories. "I was young," Mary explained. "I had no money, no connections, no power. Harrison threatened to have me committed to a psychiatric facility if I didn't sign away my parental rights. He had doctors on his payroll who were willing to declare me unfit. I would have spent my life locked away, and you would have grown up thinking I was insane." "But why?" Emma whispered. "Why would he do that?" "Because I saw what his son was, even then. Lucas was already showing signs of cruelty, of violence. I tried to warn your father, but he wouldn't listen. Harrison decided I was a threat to his family's reputation. Removing me was easier than admitting his son was a monster." Emma shook her head slowly, trying to process information that contradicted decades of ingrained beliefs. She had spent her entire childhood believing she was unwanted, unlovable. When Lucas first started controlling her, isolating her, telling her she was worthless without him, she had believed it because it confirmed what she already thought about herself. I have proof, Mary said, reaching for a worn leather bag beside her chair. She pulled out a folder thick with documents and photographs. Everything I just told you, I can show you. Emma took the folder with trembling hands. Inside, she found photographs of herself as a baby, held in the arms of a younger Mary. Letters addressed to Emma, dozens of them, all returned unopened. Legal documents showing irregularities in the custody proceedings. Bank records showing massive payments from Harrison Harrington to judges, lawyers, and doctors. I've spent 30 years collecting evidence, Mary said, waiting for the moment when I could finally reach you. When I saw the video from the cathedral, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Video? Emma felt her blood run cold. Mary pulled out her phone. Emma, I need to show you something, but I want you to understand that this is actually good news. She held up the screen. The footage was shaky, clearly recorded on someone's phone, but the image was unmistakable. Lucas drawing back his fist, the punch connecting with Emma's face, her body flying backward onto the marble steps. This has been viewed over 2 million times, Mary said quietly. Everyone saw what he did. The whole world is watching now. For the first time since waking up, Emma felt something other than fear. It was small and fragile, barely a flicker, but it was there. Hope. A knock at the door interrupted them. Detective Reed Collins entered, a man in his early 50s with the weathered face of someone who had seen too much violence to be shocked by anything. He introduced himself with professional courtesy and asked if Emma felt well enough to give a statement. Emma looked at Mary, then at the folder of evidence in her hands, then at the detective waiting patiently by the door. Yes, she said. Her voice was stronger than she expected. I'm ready to tell you everything. For the next 45 minutes, Emma spoke. She described the years of abuse, the isolation, the control, the constant fear that permeated every aspect of her existence. She told Detective Collins about bruises hidden beneath long sleeves, about hospital visits with carefully rehearsed explanations, about the slow, systematic destruction of her self-worth until she barely recognized herself anymore. When she finished, Detective Collins closed his notebook. Mrs. Harrington, based on your statement, the medical evidence, and the video footage from the cathedral, we have more than enough to arrest your husband tonight. Emma exhaled shakily. Really? Really? He nodded toward Mary. I'll need to speak with you as well, ma'am. Those documents you mentioned could be relevant to establishing a pattern of behavior. Of course, Mary said, whatever you need. After the detective left, Emma lay back against her pillows and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights hummed steadily overhead. Her baby shifted inside her, a gentle movement that felt like reassurance. It's over, Mary said softly, squeezing her daughter's hand. You're safe now. He can't hurt you anymore. Emma wanted to believe her. She wanted to believe that the nightmare was finally ending. But 7 years of marriage to Lucas Harrington had taught her one painful truth. He always found a way to win. For 3 beautiful hours, Emma allowed herself to imagine freedom. She pictured a life without fear, waking up without dreading what mood Lucas would be in, making decisions without calculating how he would react, raising her daughter in a home filled with love instead of terror. Then Victoria Chase arrived, and everything fell apart. Victoria was the most expensive defense attorney in Massachusetts. Blonde, elegant, and utterly ruthless. She had never lost a domestic violence case. Her secret was simple. She did not try to prove her clients innocent. She destroyed the credibility of their accusers so thoroughly that juries could not bring themselves to convict. The first Emma heard of Victoria's involvement was through the hospital television. A nurse had turned it on to check the evening news, and suddenly Lucas's face filled the screen. Not as a suspect, as a victim. Victoria stood at a podium outside the hospital, surrounded by cameras and microphones. Her expression projected perfect concern. My client, Lucas Harrington, is himself a victim in this tragic situation. His beloved wife suffers from severe prenatal psychosis, a documented condition that causes paranoid delusions, violent mood swings, and false memories of abuse. Emma sat up in her hospital bed, staring at the screen in disbelief. Victoria continued, we have medical records confirming Mrs. Harrington's psychiatric history. We have statements from mental health professionals who have treated her for years. Most disturbing of all, we have evidence that she has been manipulated by a woman claiming to be her estranged mother, a woman with a documented history of mental illness, fraud, and criminal behavior. No, Emma whispered. No, that's not true. Not. On the screen, Victoria held up a folder. Mary Fitzgerald was committed to a psychiatric institution in 1992 for delusional disorder. She has multiple fraud convictions. She has been stalking the Harrington family for decades, waiting for an opportunity to exploit Emma's vulnerable mental state. Mary, who had been dozing in the chair beside Emma's bed, jerked awake at the sound of her own name. Her face went pale as she watched the press conference unfold. "Those records are forged," she said. "Harrison Harrington created them 30 years ago. They're lies." But the damage was already being done. Emma watched as reporters scribbled notes, as cameras zoomed in on the fabricated documents that Victoria was displaying, as the narrative shifted from abusive husband to mentally ill wife. The door to Emma's room burst open. Lucas strode in, flanked by two hospital administrators who looked deeply uncomfortable. "My wife needs to come home," Lucas announced, his voice dripping with false concern. "She needs proper psychiatric care, not the influence of a documented fraud." Mary stood up, placing herself between Lucas and Emma's bed. "You need to leave. Right now." Lucas's smile did not reach his eyes. "I have a court order." He pulled a document from his jacket pocket and handed it to the nearest administrator. "Emergency psychiatric hold, signed by Judge Patterson an hour ago." Emma felt the room spinning around her. "You can't do this. There are witnesses. There's video evidence. Detective Collins said you were going to be arrested." Lucas leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. "Detective Collins works for a police department that I fund. Judge Patterson plays golf with my father every Sunday. Did you really think a video would be enough to stop me?" He straightened and addressed the administrators with his public voice. "I only want what's best for my wife and our unborn child. Please ensure she receives the care she needs." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked desperately toward Mary, toward the nurses, toward anyone who might help her. But she saw the fear in their eyes. Lucas Harrington's name was on buildings throughout this hospital. His family's foundation funded entire departments. Who would risk their career to help her? Then Detective Collins appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Harrington," he said calmly, "I'm afraid there's been a complication with your court order." Lucas turned, annoyance flickering across his face. "What kind of complication?" "The kind where a federal judge takes an interest." Collins held up his phone. "Seems your wife's story caught the attention of someone outside your family's sphere of influence. A civil rights attorney filed an emergency appeal 30 minutes ago. Your psychiatric hold has been suspended pending review." Lucas's jaw tightened. "That's not possible." "It's very possible." Collins stepped aside, revealing a woman in a sharp gray suit standing behind him. "This is Sarah Chen from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. She has some questions about the documents your attorney just presented to the media." Sarah Chen nodded curtly. "Mr. Harrington, we've received reports suggesting those psychiatric records may have been fraudulently created. I'm going to need you to come with me to answer some questions." For one glorious moment, Emma watched her husband's mask slip. Raw fury blazed in his eyes before he controlled it. "Of course," Lucas said smoothly. "I'm happy to cooperate. This is clearly a misunderstanding." He allowed himself to be escorted from the room, but not before shooting Emma one final look. The message was clear. This isn't over. After he left, Emma broke down completely. 7 years of suppressed terror came pouring out in violent sobs that shook her entire body. Mary held her, rocking her gently, murmuring reassurances that Emma desperately wanted to believe. But even as she cried, even as hope struggled to reassert itself, Emma knew the truth. Lucas would not stop. He had too much money, too many connections, too much to lose. He would fight with every weapon at his disposal, and Emma was running out of places to hide. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of legal battles and media chaos. The viral video from the cathedral continued to spread, but Victoria Chase's counter-narrative spread just as quickly. Social media divided into warring camps, some calling for Lucas's immediate arrest, others defending him as the victim of a mentally unstable wife and her con artist mother. Emma remained in the hospital under protective observation, too pregnant and too traumatized to be moved. Mary stayed by her side, leaving only briefly to meet with lawyers and provide documentation to federal investigators. On the third day, Detective Collins delivered news that finally felt like a turning point. The federal investigation found evidence that those psychiatric records were fabricated, he told Emma. The doctors who supposedly treated Mary don't exist. The institution where she was supposedly committed was a front company owned by Harrison Harrington's law firm. Emma felt tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. So it's over? They know the truth? Collins hesitated. There's more. The FBI found financial records suggesting years of payments to judges, police officials, and medical professionals. They're opening a full RICO investigation into the Harrington family. What does that mean for Lucas? It means he's about to have much bigger problems than a domestic violence charge. That evening, Emma watched the news with something approaching joy as federal agents executed search warrants at Harrington Foundation headquarters. Reporters breathlessly described boxes of documents being loaded into government vehicles. Legal experts speculated about the scope of the investigation. Lucas was going down, not just for hitting her, but for decades of corruption. For the first time since the cathedral, Emma allowed herself to smile. She should have known better. The call came at 3 in the morning. Emma was sleeping fitfully in her hospital bed, Mary dozing in the chair beside her when the phone beside her bed started ringing. She answered groggily, expecting a nurse or perhaps Detective Collins with an update. Instead, she heard Victoria Chase's voice, cold and precise as a surgical instrument. Mrs. Harrington, I wanted you to hear this from me before it hits the news. Your husband was released from federal custody 2 hours ago. Emma's blood turned to ice. What? How? Insufficient evidence. Victoria's tone carried a hint of satisfaction. Those financial records the FBI seized? Most of them were destroyed in an unfortunate server malfunction at the storage facility. The witnesses they planned to interview, several have suddenly developed memory problems. Others have left the country. Emma struggled to breathe. You can't do this. Everyone saw the video. He punched me in front of 500 people, did he? Victoria's voice sharpened. Our forensic experts have analyzed that footage. It's clearly been digitally manipulated. We're prepared to demonstrate in court that the video is a deep fake created by your associate Marcus Webb, a known hacker with a criminal record for computer fraud. Marcus. Emma thought of her old college friend who had been helping investigate Lucas's finances. He had a youthful hacking conviction that he'd always been honest about. In fact, Victoria continued, Mr. Webb was arrested tonight on federal charges of computer fraud and evidence tampering. His equipment has been seized. I suspect investigators will find proof that he created that cathedral video. You're framing him. I'm protecting my client from a coordinated smear campaign. Victoria paused. There's one more thing you should know. Given your documented psychiatric history and the concerns about your fitness as a mother, Judge Patterson has reinstated the emergency custody order. When your baby is born, she will be placed in your husband's care pending a full evaluation. Emma felt the room spinning. Distantly, she heard herself screaming, felt Mary grabbing the phone and demanding to know what was happening. But none of it mattered. Lucas had won. Again. Just like he always did. The next week was the worst of Emma's life. She was transferred from the hospital to a psychiatric evaluation facility, despite Dr. Coleman's furious protests. Mary was served with a restraining order, preventing her from coming within 500 feet of her daughter. Marcus remained in federal custody, his bail set at an amount his family could never afford. One by one, Lucas was eliminating everyone who might help Emma. Diana Santos, the investigative journalist who had been researching the Harrington Foundation, was fired from her newspaper after Lucas's lawyers threatened a $50 million defamation lawsuit. The domestic violence advocates who had offered Emma support suddenly found their funding sources drying up. Even Detective Collins was sidelined, transferred to a desk assignment pending an internal investigation into his handling of the case. Emma sat in her sterile room at the evaluation facility, 8 months pregnant, utterly alone. The walls were white and bare. The window looked out onto a parking lot. A television mounted near the ceiling played news coverage of Lucas Harrington's triumphant return to public life. We always knew the truth would come out, Lucas said to a crowd of supporters. My wife is a troubled woman, and I only want her to get the help she needs. Emma turned off the television and stared at the wall. She had tried to fight back. She had told the truth. She had trusted the system to protect her. And Lucas had crushed her anyway. That night, alone in the darkness, Emma placed her hands on her belly and whispered to her unborn daughter, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I wanted to protect you, but I don't know how anymore." The baby kicked against her palm, a small, strong movement that felt like defiance. Emma closed her eyes and let the tears fall. Then her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost didn't look at it. She almost threw the phone across the room. But something made her pick it up. The message was simple. He did the same thing to me. "I'm still alive. If you want the truth, come alone. Tell no one." An address followed, a rural location 2 hours outside Boston. Emma stared at the screen for a long time. Every survival instinct screamed that this was dangerous. That meeting an anonymous stranger alone in her condition was reckless and possibly suicidal. But she thought about her baby, about the custody order that would tear her daughter away the moment she was born, about Lucas's smug face on television, confident that he had won. She thought about spending the rest of her life under his control. And she made a decision. The next morning, Emma convinced her assigned nurse that she needed fresh air for her mental health. The facility wasn't a locked ward, just an evaluation center. She was technically there voluntarily. She walked out the front door, got into a taxi, and gave the driver the address from the text message. Whatever was waiting for her there, it couldn't be worse than what she was leaving behind. The farmhouse sat at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by bare winter trees that scraped against a gray sky like skeletal fingers. Emma's taxi driver gave her a dubious look as she paid the fare. "You sure about this, honey? There's nothing out here." "I'm sure." Emma stepped out of the car, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "Thank you." The taxi pulled away, leaving Emma alone in the cold silence. Frost crunched beneath her feet as she walked toward the weathered front porch. The house was modest but well-maintained, with smoke rising from a brick chimney and warm light glowing behind curtained windows. Before Emma could knock, the door opened. A woman stood in the doorway, mid-30s with brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and a thin scar cutting across her left eyebrow. Her eyes held the particular wariness of someone who had spent years looking over her shoulder. "You came," the woman said. "I wasn't sure you would. You said you knew the truth about Lucas." The woman nodded slowly. "My name is Rachel Thornton. 8 years ago, I was exactly where you are now, young, scared, completely under his control." She stepped aside. "Please, come in." The inside of the farmhouse was warm and simply furnished. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace. Emma lowered herself carefully onto a worn sofa while Rachel brought her a cup of hot tea. "I saw the video from the cathedral," Rachel said, settling into an armchair across from Emma. "I saw your face when you hit those steps, and I remembered lying on a different floor 8 years ago, feeling the exact same terror. What happened to you?" Rachel's hands tightened around her own cup. "I met Lucas at a charity fundraiser. He was charming, attentive, made me feel like the most special woman in the world. Within 6 months, I had moved into his apartment and cut ties with most of my friends and family." Emma nodded. It was a pattern she knew intimately. "The abuse started slowly, a comment here, a criticism there. Then he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. Then he shoved me into a wall. Then he punched me." Rachel touched the scar on her eyebrow. "This was his gift to me the night I told him I was leaving." Emma felt sick. "How did you get away?" Rachel's expression darkened. "I didn't get away. I was paid off." She reached beneath the cushion of her chair and pulled out a worn manila folder. "After Lucas put me in the hospital, his father came to visit me. Harrison Harrington himself, standing in my room like he owned the place. Which, knowing the Harringtons, he probably did. He offered me $500,000 to disappear. New name, new life, never speak about Lucas again. And if you refused?" Rachel's laugh was hollow. "He said I would never leave the hospital alive. He had doctors who would declare me brain dead. He had lawyers who would make sure my family never saw a dime. He looked me in the eye and told me I had 24 hours to decide. So you took the money. I was 24 years old." Rachel's voice cracked. "I was alone in a hospital bed with a broken cheekbone and 3 cracked ribs. My own family didn't believe me when I tried to tell them what Lucas was. So yes, I took the money. I ran. I've been hiding ever since." Emma processed this information slowly. Something about it gnawed at her. Why are you telling me this now? If the Harringtons threatened to kill you, why risk contacting me? Rachel met her eyes directly. Because I'm tired of being afraid. Because I saw what he did to you, and I realize that if I stay silent, he'll just keep doing it. To you, to the next woman, to the one after that. She reached into the folder and pulled out a flash drive. And because I have proof, what kind of proof? Everything. Rachel handed her the drive. I recorded Harrison making his threat. I kept copies of my medical records from the hospital. And when I was packing to leave, I found something Lucas had hidden in his apartment. Financial records showing he wasn't the first. I wasn't the first. There have been at least 4 other women over the past 20 years. Harrison paid them all off. Emma stared at the small device in her hand. On this drive was evidence that could bring down the entire Harrington empire. Evidence that could free her from Lucas forever. Why didn't you use this yourself? Because I was alone. Rachel's voice was quiet. I had no one to help me, no resources, no support. But you have something I didn't have. What's that? Rachel smiled sadly. You have a mother who spent 30 years fighting to find you. You have journalists and investigators who are willing to risk everything to expose the truth. And you have 500 witnesses who saw your husband punch you in a cathedral. Emma felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She wasn't sure if they were tears of grief or hope or simple exhaustion. There's something else you should know, Rachel continued. The reason Lucas is so desperate to control this story, the reason his father has gone to such extreme lengths. Emma wiped her eyes. What? Lucas killed someone? The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Her name was Jennifer Walsh. She was Lucas's girlfriend when he was 22. She got pregnant. She wanted to keep the baby. One night, she fell down a flight of stairs at the Harrington estate. Rachel's jaw tightened. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The baby didn't survive. Emma's hand moved instinctively to her belly. The official report called it an accident, but I found records showing Harrison paid off the medical examiner. He paid off the investigating officers. He made the whole thing disappear. She looked at Emma with fierce intensity. Lucas Harrington is not just an abuser, he's a murderer. And the only reason he hasn't been caught is because his father has spent millions keeping it buried. For a long moment, Emma couldn't speak. She sat in the warm farmhouse, holding evidence that could destroy one of the most powerful families in Massachusetts, feeling her daughter kick inside her. She thought about the life she had been living, the constant fear, the isolation, the slow erosion of everything that made her herself. She thought about her mother fighting for 30 years against an enemy with unlimited resources. She thought about her baby and the world she wanted to bring her into. How do we expose them? Emma asked. Her voice was steady now, filled with a resolve she hadn't known she possessed. Rachel smiled. That's exactly what I was hoping you would ask. Getting the evidence to the right people required careful planning. Lucas had corrupted so many systems that Emma couldn't trust official channels. Police departments had officers on his payroll. Judges played golf with his father. District attorneys received generous campaign contributions from the Harrington Foundation. Every door that should have led to justice had been locked, bolted, and welded shut by Harrington money. Emma needed to go around them entirely. She needed to build her own army. Her first call was to Diana Santos. The journalist answered on the second ring, her voice sharp with anxiety. Emma, where are you? Everyone's looking for you. The psychiatric facility reported you missing this morning. There are cops at my apartment asking questions. Lucas's lawyers are threatening to have me arrested for aiding a fugitive. I'm safe. Emma gripped the phone tighter, watching through Rachel's farmhouse window as a hawk circled lazily over the winter fields. I'm with someone who has evidence that can bring down Lucas and his entire family. Not just domestic violence charges. We're talking RICO, murder cover-ups, decades of corruption. But I need your help. There was a long pause. Emma could hear Diana breathing, could almost feel her weighing the risks against the rewards. Emma, I was fired. Diana's voice carried the weight of exhaustion and defeat. My career is effectively over. Lucas's lawyers made sure I'll never work at a major publication again. I got blacklisted from every newspaper, magazine, and network in the country. My own colleagues won't return my calls. I've been applying to write copy for furniture catalogs, and even they won't hire me. Then you have nothing left to lose. The words hung in the air between them. Emma hadn't meant them to sound harsh, but sometimes harsh truths were the only truths that mattered. Diana laughed, a sound that held more anger than humor, more determination than despair. You know what? You're absolutely right. Lucas Harrington destroyed my career because I tried to tell the truth about him. Maybe it's time I finished what I started. Can you get to a secure location? Somewhere his people can't track you? Already ahead of you, Diana's voice sharpened with renewed purpose. I've been staying at my grandmother's cabin in New Hampshire. No internet, no cell service. I have to drive 20 minutes just to get a signal. His lawyers can threaten all they want, but they can't find what they can't trace. Good. I'm going to send you an address. Bring everything you've ever gathered on the Harringtons. Every document, every source, every lead you couldn't follow because the paper wouldn't let you. Emma, Diana said quietly, what exactly do you have? Emma looked at the flash drive sitting on Rachel's kitchen table, the small device that contained enough evidence to topple an empire. Everything, Emma replied. I have everything. Her next call was more difficult. Marcus Webb answered from a prepaid phone that his cousin had smuggled into federal custody. The connection was scratchy, his voice tired, but carrying an undercurrent of stubborn determination that reminded Emma why she had trusted him in the first place. They're trying to break me, he told Emma without preamble. They keep offering plea deals if I'll testify that I created the cathedral video, that you paid me to fake evidence against Lucas. They say if I cooperate, I'll be out in 18 months. If I don't, they're talking 15 years for federal computer crimes. Emma's stomach clenched. Marcus was facing prison because he had tried to help her. His entire life was being destroyed because he had believed her story. What did you tell them? Marcus snorted, the sound crackling through the cheap phone. I told them that the only thing I faked was my enthusiasm for helping them railroad an innocent woman. They didn't appreciate my sense of humor. Then I told them that if they wanted fake evidence so badly, maybe they should check with Lucas's lawyers, because those deep fake experts they keep parading on television couldn't tell a real video from a TikTok filter. Despite everything, Emma smiled. Marcus had always had a talent for making her laugh, even in the darkest moments. It was one of the things she had missed most during the years Lucas had isolated her from everyone who cared about her. Can you help me from where you are? Not directly. They've got me on lockdown. No computer access, monitored calls, the whole 9 yards. But here's the thing. Marcus's voice dropped lower, and Emma could imagine him cupping his hand around the phone to shield the conversation. My cousin Sarah is better at this stuff than I ever was. She graduated from MIT 2 years ago, turned down job offers from Google and Facebook because she thought they were too mainstream. She's been working on accessing those offshore accounts the FBI couldn't trace. Give her 48 hours. Can she be trusted? She's family. And she saw what Lucas's lawyers did to me on television. Called it a personal insult to hackers everywhere that they were blaming such obvious, authentic footage on computer manipulation. Marcus paused. She's angry, Emma. Angry and motivated and smarter than anyone I've ever met. Lucas Harrington has no idea what's coming for him. Emma's third call was to her mother. Mary answered before the first ring finished, her voice raw with fear and hope, and 30 years of longing compressed into a single word. Emma, I'm safe, Mom. The word still felt strange on Emma's tongue. Mom. For so long, that word had been associated with absence, abandonment, the hollow ache of believing herself unwanted. Now it meant something different. Now it meant Mary's fierce eyes, her steady hands, her unwavering presence at Emma's bedside in the hospital. Emma, baby, where are you? Are you safe? I've been going out of my mind. The restraining order says I can't come within 500 feet of you, but I swear to God, Emma, if you need me, I will burn every law in this country to get to you. Tears pricked Emma's eyes. She blinked them back. I'm safe, she repeated. I'm with someone who has evidence that can destroy Lucas. Real evidence. Proof of everything he's done, going back decades. But I need you. Tell me where you are. Mary's voice was steady now, the fear replaced by determination. Tell me, and I'll be there within the hour. I don't care about restraining orders. I don't care about anything except you. Emma gave her Rachel's address. An hour later, almost to the minute, Mary's car pulled up the dirt road leading to the farmhouse. Emma watched from the window as her mother got out, her silver hair windblown and her face haggard with sleeplessness. but her posture straight and strong. When Emma opened the door, Mary stopped mid-step. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Mary crossed the remaining distance in 3 quick strides and pulled her daughter into an embrace that communicated everything words could not. 30 years of grief, 30 years of searching, 30 years of love that had never wavered. Not once, not even when the world told her to give up. "I thought I'd lost you again," Mary whispered into Emma's hair. "You'll never lose me again," Emma replied, holding her mother just as tightly. "But we have work to do." Over the next several days, the farmhouse transformed into a war room. Diana arrived with 3 boxes of documents, notebooks filled with source interviews, and a laptop loaded with files she had kept even after being fired. She spread everything across Rachel's dining table, creating a timeline of Harrington crimes that stretched back 40 years. Marcus's cousin Sarah joined them via secure video call, her face illuminated by the glow of multiple computer monitors. She was younger than Emma had expected, barely 25, with bright purple hair and a fierce intelligence burning in her dark eyes. "I've traced $18 million in payments from Harrington accounts to offshore shell companies in the Caymans," Sarah reported, her fingers dancing across keyboards as she talked. Those shell companies made payments to judges, police chiefs, district attorneys, and medical examiners across Massachusetts. "I've got names, dates, and amounts, but that's not even the best part." "What's the best part?" Emma asked. Sarah grinned. "They kept records, meticulous records. Harrison Harrington is old school. He doesn't trust digital systems, so everything important gets backed up to physical documents stored in a safety deposit box. I traced the box to a bank in Providence. The contents will verify everything I found electronically." "How do we get access to that box?" "We don't need to." Sarah's grin widened. "The FBI is about to receive an anonymous tip that will give them enough probable cause for a warrant. They'll get the documents for us." Rachel's evidence provided the historical pattern. Her folder contained medical records, photographs, and recorded conversations that proved Lucas had been abusing women since his early 20s. 4 women paid off, their silence bought with sums ranging from $200,000 to $1.5 million. 1 woman dead, her death ruled accidental by a medical examiner who received a massive payment the following week. And Emma's testimony, combined with the cathedral video, provided the present-day proof that the monster was still active, that he hadn't changed, hadn't reformed, hadn't become the philanthropic saint his public relations team portrayed. He had simply gotten better at hiding. "The question," Diana said during one of their late-night strategy sessions, "is how do we release everything in a way that Lucas can't suppress? He owns too many media outlets. He's got too many connections. If we go through normal channels, his lawyers will tie us up in court for years while the story dies." Emma stared at the wall of evidence, feeling the weight of everything they had gathered. So much truth, so much horror, and still no clear path to making the world listen. It was Rachel who broke the silence. "The Harrington Foundation Annual Gala," she said slowly. "That's still happening, isn't it?" Diana nodded. 5 days from now, every major media outlet will have cameras there. It's supposed to be Lucas's triumphant return to public life. The wronged husband standing strong despite his crazy wife's accusations. What if we gave them something more interesting to film? Mary shook her head. That place will be crawling with his security, with his people. Emma is supposed to be in a psychiatric facility. How would she even get inside without being recognized? "She won't have to get inside," Diana said slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. She turned her laptop to show them a website. "The gala is being live-streamed on 3 platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and the Foundation's own website. If we can access those feeds and broadcast our evidence simultaneously, millions of people will see it in real time. No editors to kill the story, no lawyers to issue injunctions, just raw truth going out live to the entire world." Emma's heart began to pound. "Can we actually do that?" Sarah's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "I can get us into the live stream infrastructure. Their security is corporate standard, which means expensive but predictable. But I'll need to be physically close to their broadcast truck to override their fail-safes. Like within 100 feet, maybe less." That means someone needs to be at the gala, Mary said slowly. Everyone turned to look at Emma. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly. The baby shifted inside her, a rolling movement that felt like agreement, like determination inherited before birth. Not just someone, Emma said. Her voice was steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. Me. Everyone started talking at once. Mary protested that it was too dangerous, that Lucas could hurt her, that the stress could send her into premature labor. Rachel argued that Emma should stay hidden while they released the evidence remotely. Diana pointed out the legal risks, the possibility of arrest, the 100 ways the plan could go wrong. Emma let them voice their concerns. She understood that they spoke from love, from the desperate desire to protect her. But she also understood something they didn't. Listen to me, she said, raising her hand for silence. This only works if I'm there to tell my story. Not through a recording, not through an interview conducted from hiding. Me, Emma Harrington, standing on that stage, looking into a camera, speaking directly to every person watching. She looked around at the women who had become her army, her mother who had fought for 30 years, Rachel who had survived and returned to fight again, Diana who had sacrificed her career for the truth, Sarah whose fingers flew across keyboards with the power to topple empires. Lucas spent 7 years convincing me I was weak, Emma continued, that I was nothing, that no one would ever believe me, that I was worthless without him. She straightened her shoulders. Every victim of abuse hears those words. Every woman who's been beaten, controlled, isolated, gaslit, they all hear that same voice telling them they're powerless. Her voice strengthened with every word. I'm going to that gala. I'm going to stand on that stage with my pregnant belly and my bruised face and my truth. And I'm going to show every woman watching that you can fight back, that monsters can be defeated, that your voice matters, even when they tell you it doesn't. The room was silent. Then Mary stepped forward and took her daughter's hands. When you were little, before they took you away from me, do you remember what I used to tell you? Emma felt tears spilling down her cheeks. You told me I was brave, that I was strong, that no matter what happened, I should never let anyone make me feel small. Mary nodded, her own eyes glistening. I've spent 30 years praying you still remembered those words, praying that somehow, somewhere, they were still inside you. Emma squeezed her mother's hands. I forgot them for a long time. Lucas made me forget, but I remember now, and I'm going to make sure everyone else remembers too. Mary pulled her into a fierce embrace. Then I'll be right there with you, she whispered. Just like I should have been all along. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Boston glittered with enough wealth to fund a small country. Crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars cast prismatic light across 500 guests dressed in designer gowns and custom-tailored suits that cost more than most Americans earned in a year. A string quartet played Vivaldi softly in one corner, while an ice sculpture of the Harrington Foundation logo slowly melted in another. Waiters in crisp white jackets circulated with Dom Perignon and caviar canapes, their movements choreographed with military precision. The guest list read like a who's who of Massachusetts power. Senators mingled with hedge fund managers. CEOs clinked glasses with celebrity philanthropists. The mayor posed for photographs beside a news anchor whose network had received substantial Harrington advertising revenue. And at the center of it all, holding court like a king among his subjects, stood Lucas Harrington. He wore a charcoal suit that cost $12,000, a silk tie in foundation blue, and an expression of humble suffering that he had practiced in the mirror for hours. His public relations team had prepared him thoroughly. Speak softly, show vulnerability, let others come to you. You are the victim here. Play the part. A woman dripping in diamonds clutched his arm with manicured fingers. You're so brave, she cooed, her voice carrying the particular sincerity of someone who had never suffered a genuine hardship in her life. Standing strong despite everything that poor troubled wife of yours has put you through. The stress must be unbearable. Lucas ducked his head in a masterful display of reluctant heroism. I just want her to get the help she needs, and I want to be there for our child, no matter what. His voice cracked slightly on the word child. The woman's eyes misted with sympathetic tears. The performance was flawless. Everyone in the room had seen his version of events, broadcast repeatedly on every news channel, and shared across every social media platform. The carefully edited interviews where he dabbed at his eyes while describing his wife's breakdown. The expert witnesses explaining prenatal psychosis in grave, concerned tones. The heartbreaking account of a husband desperately trying to help his mentally ill wife while she pushed him away and made horrific accusations. No one in the glittering ballroom questioned the narrative. No one noticed the contradictions. No one wondered why a man whose wife was supposedly suffering from a psychiatric emergency was hosting a champagne gala instead of sitting vigil at her bedside. And no one noticed the server in the corner, her pregnant belly hidden beneath an oversized catering uniform, watching the room with sharp, calculating eyes. Emma had entered through the service entrance 2 hours earlier, walking past security guards who barely glanced at her borrowed credentials. Rachel had provided the uniform, purchased from a medical supply company that served local catering staff. Diana had arranged the credentials through a contact who owed her a favor from her investigative journalism days. Sarah was stationed in a utility van 50 feet from the broadcast truck, her fingers flying across 3 keyboards simultaneously, waiting for the signal. "The live stream begins in 20 minutes, Diana's voice said through the tiny earpiece hidden beneath Emma's hair. Sarah's in position. She's already mapped their firewall and found the back door she needs. Rachel's monitoring the exits and will alert us if security moves toward you. How are you holding up?" Emma's heart was pounding so hard she was surprised it wasn't visible through the polyester shirt of her uniform. Her back ached from the weight of her belly. Her feet throbbed from 2 hours of standing. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to escape before Lucas noticed her and finished what he had started in the cathedral. "Terrified," she admitted, "but ready. Just give us the signal when you're in position." "And Emma," Diana's voice softened with emotion, "whatever happens tonight, I want you to know something. I've covered a lot of stories in my career. I've interviewed presidents and prisoners, saints and monsters, but I have never met anyone as brave as you. You've got this." Emma swallowed hard and continued moving through the crowd, keeping her head down, avoiding eye contact, staying invisible. She had learned how to be invisible during her marriage to Lucas, how to fade into the background, how to become so small and quiet that he forgot she existed. Now she used those same skills against him. She watched Lucas work the room, saw the way people gravitated toward him like moths toward a flame. He touched shoulders, remembered names, made each person feel like the most important individual in the room. It was a talent that had first attracted Emma to him, back when she was young and naive and desperate for someone to make her feel special. Now she understood what that charm really was: a predator's camouflage, a monster wearing a human mask. She thought about all the women he had hurt. Rachel, who had spent 8 years hiding in a farmhouse, jumping at shadows, afraid to use her real name. Jennifer Walsh, dead at 23, her unborn child dying with her on the marble floor of the Harrington estate. The 4 other women whose silence had been purchased with blood money, their trauma reduced to entries in a payoff ledger. No more, Emma thought. Tonight it ends. At exactly 8:45, the master of ceremonies took the stage. He was a silver-haired man with a broadcast journalist's smile and a voice that had been announcing charity events for 3 decades. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. It's my tremendous honor to introduce the evening's main event, a tribute video celebrating 10 years of extraordinary philanthropy under the leadership of our founder and chairman. Please join me in honoring Lucas Harrington." Applause rippled through the ballroom. Lucas made his way toward the stage, accepting handshakes and air kisses, his humble expression never wavering. He climbed the steps and took his position beside the podium, hands clasped in front of him, head slightly bowed, the picture of grateful humility. The lights dimmed. The massive screens flanking the stage flickered to life. And then, instead of the expected tribute video with soaring music and inspirational footage, a face appeared that made Lucas's blood run cold. Rachel Thornton looked directly into the camera, her scar visible, her eyes blazing with 8 years of suppressed rage. "My name is Rachel Thornton. 8 years ago, I was beaten nearly to death by Lucas Harrington." The ballroom erupted into confused murmurs. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Conversations died mid-sentence. 500 pairs of eyes turned toward the screens, unable to process what they were seeing. Lucas's carefully crafted smile froze on his face. His hands, which had been clasped so serenely, clenched into fists at his sides. Rachel's recorded testimony continued, her voice calm and steady and devastating. I was 24 years old when I met Lucas at a charity fundraiser. He was charming and attentive. He made me feel like the most special woman in the world. Within 6 months, I had moved into his apartment and cut ties with most of my friends and family. That was exactly what he wanted. Documents began flashing across the screens. Medical records showing a fractured cheekbone, 3 cracked ribs, and extensive bruising. Photographs of Rachel's battered face, her left eye swollen shut, blood crusted in her hair. Bank transfer records showing $500,000 moved from a Harrington account to Rachel's name. After Lucas put me in the hospital, his father came to visit me. Harrison Harrington looked me in the eye and told me I had 2 choices: take the money and disappear forever, or refuse and never leave that hospital alive. Rachel's voice hardened. I took the money. I ran. I've been hiding ever since. But I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. And I'm done letting Lucas Harrington hurt women. The screen split. On one side, Rachel's testimony continued. On the other side, footage began to play that made several guests gasp audibly. The cathedral video, the real one, unedited and authenticated. Lucas's fist connecting with Emma's face, her body flying backward, the sound of her impact on the marble steps, the screams of witnesses, the horror frozen on 500 faces. This is not a deep fake, Diana's voice narrated over the images. This footage has been authenticated by 3 independent forensic experts using frame-by-frame analysis, audio waveform examination, and metadata verification. The so-called experts who claimed this video was fabricated were paid by Harrington Foundation funds. What you are seeing is real. What Lucas Harrington did, it is real. Lucas was moving now, pushing through the frozen crowd toward the technical booth at the side of the ballroom. Cut the feed, he snarled at the panicked technicians. Cut it now. I don't care what you have to do. Shut it down. But Sarah had done her work too well. Every time the technicians tried to override the broadcast, she blocked them. Every backup system they activated, she had already compromised. The truth kept streaming, unstoppable, reaching millions of viewers around the world. More documents appeared on the screens, financial records showing decades of payoffs, names and dates and amounts, judges who had ruled in Harrington's favor after receiving substantial donations, police officers who had closed investigations after their mortgages mysteriously disappeared, medical examiners who had signed fraudulent death certificates after receiving payments in untraceable cash. And then came the evidence that made the room go completely silent. A photograph of Jennifer Walsh, young, beautiful, pregnant, smiling at the camera with the innocent hope of someone who still believed in happy endings. Diana's voice was heavy with grief and anger as she narrated. Jennifer Walsh was Lucas Harrington's girlfriend 15 years ago. She was 23 years old. She was pregnant with his child. According to the official report, she died from an accidental fall down a staircase at the Harrington estate. But financial records show that the medical examiner who signed her death certificate received $200,000 from Harrison Harrington 1 week later. Jennifer Walsh did not fall. She was pushed, and the Harrington family made her death disappear. Lucas had stopped trying to shut down the broadcast. He stood frozen in the middle of the ballroom, his face ashen, his entire world crumbling around him in real time. And then Emma stepped out of the shadows. She walked toward the stage with steady, deliberate steps, her pregnant belly straining against the catering uniform, her chin lifted high despite the terror coursing through her veins. The crowd parted before her like the Red Sea, guests stumbling backward in shock as they recognized the woman they had been told was mentally ill, dangerous, delusional. Cameras swiveled to follow her. Every news outlet, every live stream platform, every social media feed captured the moment Emma Harrington climbed the steps to the stage and stood before the microphone. "My name is Emma Harrington," she said, her voice carrying through the ballroom and out to the millions watching around the world. "For 7 years, I was married to a monster." Lucas lunged toward the stage, his carefully maintained control finally shattering completely. Security guards moved to intercept him, but they hesitated, uncertain whose orders to follow, confused by the chaos unfolding around them. Emma continued, her voice growing stronger with every word. Lucas Harrington beat me. He isolated me from everyone who loved me. He controlled what I wore, what I ate, who I talked to, what I was allowed to think. He told me every single day that I was worthless, that no one would ever believe me, that I was nothing without him. She pointed at the screens where documents continued to scroll in damning succession. Those records are not fake. Those are payments to at least 4 women my husband abused before me. Those are bribes to judges, police officers, and medical professionals who helped cover up his crimes for decades. The Harrington Foundation isn't a charity. It's a money laundering operation designed to buy silence and purchase impunity. Lucas broke through the security guards and charged the stage, his face twisted with the same murderous rage Emma had seen in the cathedral, the same rage that had terrorized her for 7 years, the same rage that had killed Jennifer Walsh. "You lying bitch," he screamed, his voice cracking with fury. "I'll kill you. I'll kill you both. I'll make sure you never see that baby. I'll destroy everyone who helped you. I'll—" He grabbed Emma's arm, yanking her toward him with violent force that made several guests scream. And in that moment, with Lucas's fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to leave bruises, with his face inches from hers and his breath hot with rage, Emma felt something shift inside her. A sudden cramping pressure, a rush of warmth between her legs. Her water had broken. Her baby was coming. Lucas, still screaming threats, didn't notice, but Emma did. Despite the pain beginning to build in her abdomen, despite the fear of what Lucas might do, she felt an unexpected calm settle over her. Her daughter was choosing this moment to enter the world, choosing to be born in the middle of chaos and courage, choosing to arrive as her mother stood up to a monster. It felt like a sign, like a blessing, like the universe itself was declaring that the Harrington dynasty ended tonight. The pain hit Emma like a wave, and she cried out. Not from fear, from triumph. Suddenly, the ballroom exploded into action. Security guards who had been hesitating finally made their choice, tackling Lucas and dragging him away from Emma. Paramedics who had been standing by rushed toward the stage with a stretcher. Camera operators pushed closer, capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. And Mary Fitzgerald appeared at her daughter's side, moving through the chaos with the fierce determination of a woman who had waited 30 years for this moment. "I've got you," Mary said, wrapping her arms around Emma. "I've got you, baby. Hold on. Just hold on." As the paramedics loaded Emma onto the stretcher, as Lucas was dragged away in handcuffs screaming threats that no one listened to anymore, as millions of viewers around the world watched the total destruction of everything the Harringtons had built, Emma clutched her mother's hand and felt her daughter fighting to be born. She thought about everything she had survived, the isolation, the beatings, the years of being told she was worthless, the systematic destruction of her identity until she forgot who she was. She thought about all the women who had suffered at Lucas's hands. Rachel hiding in a farmhouse, Jennifer buried in an unmarked grave, the others, their pain reduced to payoff entries. She thought about her daughter, about to enter a world where monsters like Lucas Harrington could no longer hide behind wealth and power and lies. And despite the pain, despite the chaos, despite everything, Emma smiled. "It's over," she whispered to the baby inside her. "It's finally over. And you, my beautiful girl, are going to grow up free." The ambulance doors closed. The sirens began to wail. And as the vehicle pulled away from the Ritz-Carlton, carrying Emma toward a hospital and a future and a life she had never dared to imagine, she held her mother's hand and felt, for the first time in 7 years, what it meant to be truly, completely, unconditionally loved. The Harrington Empire was burning, and from its ashes, a new life was about to begin. The ambulance tore through Boston's night streets with sirens screaming and lights painting red and blue shadows across every building they passed. Inside the cramped vehicle, Emma lay on the stretcher, her fingers crushing her mother's hand as another contraction ripped through her body like lightning made of fire. The pain was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Not even Lucas's fists had hurt like this. This was primal, elemental. Her body was being torn apart and rebuilt simultaneously, every cell screaming as her daughter fought her way into existence. "Vital signs are dropping," one paramedic shouted to the other. "Blood pressure's falling. We need to move faster." The driver hit the accelerator. Emma felt the vehicle lurch forward, felt the world tilt and spin around her. Through the haze of agony, she heard Mary's voice, steady and strong, despite the fear Emma could see in her mother's eyes. "Stay with me, Emma. Stay with me. You've survived worse than this. You've survived a monster. You can survive bringing your daughter into the world." Emma tried to focus on the words, tried to anchor herself to something real. But the pain kept pulling her under, wave after wave of pressure that felt like her entire body was being compressed into a space too small to contain it. "The baby's coming too fast," the paramedic said, his voice tight with urgency. "Her cervix is already dilated. We're not going to make it to the hospital." "What does that mean?" Mary demanded. "It means we might have to deliver in the ambulance." Emma heard the words through a fog of sensation. Deliver in the ambulance. Her baby born in the back of a speeding vehicle, surrounded by strangers and medical equipment and the wailing of sirens. It wasn't how she had imagined this moment. During the early months of her pregnancy, before Lucas's violence had escalated, before the cathedral, before everything fell apart, she had pictured a peaceful delivery room. Soft lighting, gentle music. Lucas holding her hand, playing the role of supportive husband. That fantasy seemed laughable now. Lucas had never been supportive. He had never been a husband. He had been a captor, and she had been his prisoner. But this, she realized through the pain, this was better. Her daughter would not be born into Lucas's world. Her daughter would be born into chaos and courage and the fierce protective love of women who had fought to give her freedom. Another contraction hit, and Emma screamed. The sound tore from her throat, raw and primal, echoing off the metal walls of the ambulance. She felt her body bearing down without her permission, felt the overwhelming pressure of her daughter demanding to be born. "I can see the head," the paramedic announced. "We're doing this here. Everyone stay calm." Mary leaned closer, her silver hair brushing Emma's sweat-soaked forehead. "You're doing amazing, baby. You're so strong. Just a little more, and you'll meet your daughter." Emma looked into her mother's eyes and saw 30 years of love reflected back at her. 30 years of searching, 30 years of hoping, 30 years of refusing to give up. She thought about the women who had made this moment possible. Rachel, who had spent 8 years hiding but found the courage to come forward. Diana, who had sacrificed her career for the truth. Sarah, whose fingers had danced across keyboards to expose an empire of corruption. Mary, who had never stopped fighting. And she thought about her daughter, the tiny life that had given her the strength to fight back, the reason she had walked into that gala, the reason she had stood on that stage and spoken her truth to the world. "I'm not giving up now," Emma whispered through gritted teeth. And neither is she. She pushed. Every muscle in her body contracted. Every nerve ending screamed. The pain reached a crescendo that seemed impossible to survive. And then, suddenly, miraculously, the pressure released. A cry filled the ambulance, high and strong and absolutely perfect. The paramedic lifted a tiny, squirming, red-faced creature into the air. Emma caught a glimpse of flailing limbs, of clenched fists, of a mouth open wide in outrage at being thrust into the cold, bright world. "It's a girl," the paramedic announced, his voice breaking with emotion despite his professional training. "Healthy lungs on this one." He placed the baby on Emma's chest, and the world stopped spinning. Everything else fell away. The pain, the fear, the memories of everything Lucas had done. The 7 years of abuse, the cathedral, the gala, the months of fighting for her life and her freedom. There was only this, her daughter, tiny and perfect and alive. The baby's cries softened as she felt her mother's heartbeat beneath her cheek. Her fingers, impossibly small, curled against Emma's skin. Her eyes, still squinted against the unfamiliar light, seemed to search for something. Emma looked into her daughter's face and felt something crack open inside her chest. Not breaking, blooming. A love so fierce and absolute that it rewrote every cell in her body. A love that made everything she had suffered worthwhile. A love that promised she would never ever let anyone hurt this child. "Hi, baby," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face and mixing with the sweat and exhaustion of labor. "Hi, I'm your mom." And I'm going to spend my whole life making sure no one ever hurts you. No one makes you feel small. No one takes away your voice. Mary stood beside the stretcher, her own tears falling freely. She reached out with trembling fingers and touched her granddaughter's cheek with a reverence usually reserved for sacred things. "She's beautiful," Mary breathed. "She's absolutely beautiful. She has your eyes, Emma, and your grandmother's chin. My mother would have loved her so much." The ambulance pulled into the hospital's emergency entrance with a screech of brakes. Medical staff swarmed the vehicle, ready to take over, but the paramedic held up a hand. "Baby's already here," he said, grinning. "Delivered in the bus about 3 minutes ago. Mom and daughter both stable." Dr. Patricia Coleman pushed through the crowd of medical personnel, her reading glasses askew and her coat buttoned wrong. She had clearly been dragged out of bed, but her eyes were sharp and focused as she climbed into the ambulance. "I saw what happened on television," she told Emma, her voice thick with emotion. "What you did at that gala was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. And now look at you, delivering your own baby in the back of an ambulance like it's nothing." Emma laughed weakly. "It wasn't nothing. It was the hardest thing I've ever done." Dr. Coleman smiled and began examining the baby with gentle, practiced hands. "Well, you did it perfectly. She's healthy, strong, beautiful." She looked up at Emma with something like awe. "You're going to be an amazing mother." They transferred Emma to a gurney and wheeled her into the hospital, her daughter still cradled against her chest. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright after the darkness of the ambulance. The sounds seemed too loud. But none of it mattered. Her daughter was here. Her daughter was safe. Her daughter was free. In the private room they gave her, Mary sat beside the bed and watched Emma nurse her baby for the first time. The intimacy of the moment, the connection between mother and child, brought fresh tears to Mary's eyes. "I miss this with you," Mary said softly. "They took you away before I could experience any of this. Your first smile, your first word, your first steps. 30 years of moments I'll never get back." Emma reached out and took her mother's hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." Mary squeezed her fingers tightly. "What are you going to name her?" Emma looked down at her daughter, at the tiny face that had already captured her entire heart. She thought about everything they had been through together. The fear, the fight, the moment she had stood on that stage and reclaimed her voice. "Grace," Emma said. "Her name is Grace Mary Fitzgerald." Mary's breath caught. "Fitzgerald?" Emma nodded firmly. "Not Harrington. Never Harrington. That name dies tonight." She stroked her daughter's cheek. "She comes from a line of women who never give up. She should carry that legacy in her name." Mary dissolved into sus, pulling Emma and Grace into an embrace that felt like coming home. Outside the hospital room, the world continued to spin in chaos. News of the gala disaster had spread across every platform and network. Analysts dissected the evidence Emma had presented. Pundits debated the implications. Former friends and associates of the Harrington family rushed to distance themselves, claiming they had always suspected something was wrong. Lucas Harrington's face was everywhere, but not as the philanthropic hero he had pretended to be. Now he was the monster, the abuser, the murderer. His carefully crafted image had been shattered beyond repair. But inside the quiet hospital room there was only peace. 3 generations of women, finally together. A grandmother who had fought for 30 years. A mother who had found the courage to break free. A daughter who represented everything they had fought for. Hope, freedom, the promise of a better future. Detective Collins arrived around midnight, knocking softly before entering. He looked exhausted but satisfied, like a man who had finally seen justice served after years of watching the guilty go free. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, keeping his voice low, "but I thought you'd want to hear this in person." Emma nodded, still holding Grace against her chest. "Lucas Harrington has been arrested." Collins allowed himself a small smile. "Assault, attempted kidnapping, witness tampering, obstruction of justice. Based on the evidence you presented tonight, the FBI is reopening the investigation into Jennifer Walsh's death. They're treating it as a potential homicide." Emma closed her eyes. Jennifer, the woman she had never met, the woman whose death had haunted this entire story. Finally, she might receive justice too. "There's more," Collins continued. "Harrison Harrington was arrested 3 hours ago on federal RICO charges. Conspiracy, money laundering, bribery of public officials. The FBI has been building a case against him for years, but they could never get enough evidence. Tonight you gave them everything they needed. The whole empire is coming down, Mary said softly. Collins nodded. The doctors who signed off on those fake psychiatric evaluations have had their licenses suspended pending investigation. The judges who granted Lucas's emergency custody orders are under review by the Judicial Conduct Board. The police officers who looked the other way are facing internal affairs inquiries. He met Emma's eyes with genuine respect. You didn't just expose Lucas. You exposed the entire system that protected him. Emma looked at her daughter sleeping peacefully against her chest. Good, she said quietly. Burn it all down. After Collins left, Mary helped Emma settle into a comfortable position for sleep. But before she closed her eyes, Emma had one more thing to say. Mom, yes, baby, thank you. Emma's voice was thick with exhaustion and emotion. For never giving up, for fighting for 30 years, for being here now. Mary leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead. I would have fought for 30 more, she whispered, reddened. I would have fought forever. Because that's what mothers do. Emma drifted into sleep with her daughter in her arms and her mother at her side. For the first time in 7 years, she had no nightmares. The trial of Lucas Harrington became the most watched legal proceeding in Massachusetts history. Every major news network carried live coverage. Social media exploded with commentary and analysis. Legal experts debated every motion and objection. The courtroom gallery was packed every single day with journalists, advocates, domestic violence survivors, and ordinary citizens who wanted to witness the fall of a monster. Emma attended every session, sitting in the front row with Grace in a carrier beside her and Mary holding her hand. She had been advised to stay home, to avoid the stress, to let the lawyers handle everything. But Emma refused. I spent 7 years in silence, she told her attorney. I'm not going to be silent anymore. I want Lucas to see me every day. I want him to look at what he tried to destroy and know that he failed. The prosecution's case was devastating. Rachel Thornton took the stand on the third day, her voice steady as she described the abuse she had suffered and the payoff that had bought her silence. She showed the court her medical records, her photographs, the recording of Harrison Harrington threatening her life if she refused to disappear. When the defense attorney tried to challenge her credibility, Rachel fixed him with a stare that could have frozen fire. Your client broke my cheekbone, she said. Your client cracked 3 of my ribs. Your client's father threatened to have me killed if I ever spoke about what happened. You can call me whatever names you want. You can attack my character however you like. But the truth is the truth. And the truth is that Lucas Harrington is a violent predator who has been hurting women for over 2 decades. Financial experts testified next, walking the jury through the labyrinth of shell companies, offshore accounts, and bribes that had protected the Harrington family for generations. They showed how judges had been paid off, how police investigations had been buried, how an entire system of corruption had been built to shield Lucas from consequences. The evidence of payments to Jennifer Walsh's medical examiner sparked particular outrage. Documents showed that Dr. Robert Hansen had received $200,000 within a week of signing Jennifer's death certificate as accidental. Phone records showed multiple calls between Hansen and Harrison Harrington in the days following her death. A forensic pathologist testified that the injuries Jennifer sustained were inconsistent with a fall and highly consistent with being pushed. By the end of the second week, Lucas's defense team was visibly desperate. They had tried to argue that the evidence was fabricated, that Emma was mentally unstable, that the entire case was a conspiracy orchestrated by jealous competitors. None of it worked. The evidence was too comprehensive. The testimony was too consistent. The truth was too overwhelming. On the 15th day of the trial, Emma took the stand. She had prepared for this moment for months, had practiced her testimony with her attorney until she could recite it in her sleep, had worked with her therapist on staying calm under pressure, on not letting Lucas's presence in the courtroom trigger her trauma responses. But when she sat in the witness box and looked out at the packed gallery, all the preparation seemed inadequate. Her heart hammered in her chest. Her palms were slick with sweat. Her voice trembled as she stated her name for the record. Then she looked at Lucas. He sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, his hair neatly styled, his expression carefully arranged to project confused innocence. He looked like the man she had married, the man she had believed would love and protect her. But Emma saw through the mask now. She saw the monster underneath, and something inside her shifted. The fear didn't disappear, but it moved aside, making room for something stronger. Anger, determination, the fierce protective love of a mother who would do anything to make the world safer for her daughter. Emma began to speak. She described how Lucas had courted her with charm and attentiveness, how he had made her feel special, valued, loved for the first time in her life, how gradually, so gradually she barely noticed, he had isolated her from everyone who cared about her. She described the first time he hit her, a slap across the face for talking to a male colleague at a work event. He had apologized afterward, cried, promised it would never happen again. She had believed him. She described how the violence escalated. Punches instead of slaps, kicks when she was down. Once, he had choked her until she blacked out, then acted confused when she woke up gasping on the floor. She described the psychological abuse that was almost worse than the physical. The constant criticism, the gaslighting that made her doubt her own memories, the isolation that left her with no one to turn to for help. She described the night Lucas punched her in front of 500 witnesses at the cathedral, and she described how even then, even with video evidence viewed by millions, he had almost convinced the world that she was the crazy one. When the defense attorney rose for cross-examination, he tried every trick in the book. He suggested Emma was exaggerating. He implied she had provoked the violence. He questioned her mental stability, her motivations, her truthfulness. Emma remained calm through all of it. "I spent 7 years being gaslit by your client," she told him. "I know the difference between truth and lies. And I know that everyone in this courtroom, everyone watching at home, everyone who has seen the evidence can see the truth now. Lucas Harrington is a violent abuser. He nearly killed Jennifer Walsh. He tried to kill me, and no amount of expensive lawyers or clever questions will change that." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When the foreperson rose to deliver the verdict, Emma held her breath. Mary gripped her hand so tightly it hurt. Grace slept peacefully in her carrier, unaware that the moment that would define her mother's life was unfolding around her. On the charge of aggravated assault, the foreperson announced, "We find the defendant guilty." On the charge of witness tampering, guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty. On the charge of attempted kidnapping, guilty. Each word fell like a hammer blow. Lucas's face, which had remained carefully composed throughout the trial, began to crumble. By the time the final verdict was read, he was gripping the edge of the defense table so hard his knuckles had turned white. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. On that day, Emma stood before the court and delivered a victim impact statement that would be quoted in domestic violence training materials for years to come. "Lucas Harrington took 7 years of my life," she said, her voice steady and strong. "He took my confidence, my independence, my sense of self. He made me believe I was worthless. He made me believe no one would ever love me. He made me believe I deserved to be hit." She looked directly at Lucas, but he couldn't take my strength. He couldn't take my courage. He couldn't take the love of a mother who fought for 30 years to find me. And he couldn't take my voice. Her voice rose, carrying to every corner of the courtroom. "To every woman listening who is in a situation like mine was, I want you to hear this. You are not worthless. You do not deserve to be hurt. And there are people who will believe you, who will help you, who will fight for you. You are stronger than you know, and your voice matters." The judge sentenced Lucas Harrington to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. His father received 30 years on RICO charges. The Harrington Foundation was dissolved by court order, its $300 million in assets distributed to domestic violence organizations across the country. In the months that followed, Emma watched as the ripple effects of the trial transformed countless lives. The corrupt judges who had protected the Harringtons were removed from the bench. The police officers who had buried investigations were fired and prosecuted. The medical professionals who had signed false reports lost their licenses and faced criminal charges. Jennifer Walsh's case was reopened. New forensic evidence, combined with the financial records linking the Harringtons to the cover-up, led to additional charges against Harrison Harrington for accessory to murder. Jennifer's family, who had spent 15 years believing their daughter's death was an accident, finally learned the truth. And women across the country, inspired by Emma's testimony, began coming forward with their own stories of abuse. Emma received hundreds of letters, thousands of emails, messages from survivors who said her courage had given them permission to speak, messages from women who had left their abusers after watching her testimony, messages from daughters who had finally told their mothers what had been happening behind closed doors. One letter stood out. It came from a young woman in Texas named Maria, handwritten on lined notebook paper. "Dear Emma," the letter began, "I was exactly where you were, trapped in a marriage with a man who made me believe I was worthless. When I read about what you did, how you stood up in front of the whole world and told the truth, something inside me woke up. I left him the next day. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I'm safe now, I'm free, and it's because of you. You saved my life." Emma read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face each time. Then she picked up the phone and called Diana Santos. "I want to do more," Emma said. "I want to help other women who are going through what I went through, what Maria went through, what Rachel went through." Diana had been waiting for this call. Together, they founded the Grace Fitzgerald Foundation. The organization provided legal assistance for women seeking protection orders, housing support for those fleeing abusive homes, counseling services for survivors rebuilding their lives, and education programs to help communities recognize the signs of domestic violence. Rachel Thornton came out of hiding permanently to serve on the foundation's board. Marcus Webb, his charges dropped after the full truth emerged, designed secure communication systems that allowed survivors to seek help without their abusers tracking them. Sarah, his cousin, built a database that connected victims with resources in every state. Within 2 years, the Grace Fitzgerald Foundation had helped over 3,000 women escape abusive situations. It had trained police departments in 12 states on trauma-informed responses to domestic violence calls. It had lobbied successfully for stronger protective order enforcement and longer sentences for repeat abusers. And Emma, who had once believed she was worthless, became a nationally recognized advocate for domestic violence survivors. She spoke at conferences and testified before congressional committees. She appeared on television programs and podcasts, sharing her story in hopes that it would help others find their voice. She wrote articles that reached millions of readers, offering both solidarity to survivors and practical advice for those still trapped. Through it all, Grace grew. She took her first steps in the garden of the house Emma had bought outside Boston. She spoke her first words to Mary, calling her grandma with a grin that showed 2 tiny teeth. She developed a passion for butterflies and a fear of vacuum cleaners and a laugh that could make Emma cry with joy. On Grace's first birthday, Emma sat on the porch of their home and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Mary sat beside her, Grace on her lap, 3 generations of women who had fought impossible battles and won. "I never thought I'd be here," Emma said quietly. "I never thought I'd be free. I never thought I'd be happy." Mary reached over and squeezed her hand. "You always deserved this," Mary said. "You always deserved happiness and freedom and love. Lucas tried to convince you otherwise, but he was wrong." Emma looked at her daughter, at this perfect, innocent child who carried the strength of generations in her blood. "She's going to grow up free," Emma said. "She's never going to know what it feels like to be afraid in her own home. She's never going to doubt her own worth," Mary smiled. "Because of you. Because you fought for her. Because you broke free." Emma shook her head. "Because of us. Because you fought for 30 years. Because Rachel found the courage to come forward. Because Diana sacrificed her career for the truth. Because every woman who refused to stay silent made it possible for the next one to speak." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun finished its descent. The evening air smelled of flowers from the garden Emma had planted in the spring. Fireflies began to emerge, tiny sparks of light dancing across the lawn. Grace reached out towards them with chubby fingers, babbling happily. "Look, baby girl," Emma whispered. "Those are fireflies. They make their own light." She thought about everything she had been through, the darkness, the fear, the years of believing she would never escape. And she thought about where she was now, safe, loved, free, making her own light in a world that had once tried to extinguish her completely. We make our own light too, Emma told her daughter. No matter how dark it gets, we make our own light. Grace laughed and clapped her hands, and Emma held her close. And for the first time in her life, everything felt exactly right. 6 months after the trial, on a crisp autumn evening, Emma sat on her porch watching Grace play in the fallen leaves. The baby was walking now, toddling on unsteady legs with the fearless determination that reminded Emma so much of her mother. Mary was inside making dinner. The smell of roasting chicken drifted through the screen door. It was a perfect evening, peaceful and ordinary, in all the ways Emma had once dreamed of. She checked the mail while Grace investigated a particularly interesting pile of leaves. Bills, advertisements, a catalog she hadn't ordered, and an envelope with no return address. Emma's heart stuttered. She stood frozen for a moment, the envelope heavy in her hand. Then slowly she opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Emma's house from the outside. The angle was clear, taken from somewhere across the street. The image captured Emma on the porch, Grace in her arms, both of them silhouetted against the warm light spilling from the windows. It had been taken at night. Recently. Emma's hands trembled as she turned the photograph over. On the back, written in unfamiliar handwriting, was a message that turned her blood to ice. Lucas sends his regards. This isn't over. She looked up, scanning the quiet street, the peaceful houses, the ordinary evening that suddenly felt threatening. Nothing moved. No one watched. But someone had been here. Someone had photographed her family. Someone wanted her to know she wasn't safe. Emma walked inside on numb legs, her mind racing. Grace needed her bottle. Mary was asking about dinner. Normal things, ordinary things, but nothing felt normal anymore. She waited until Grace was in bed before showing Mary the photograph. Her mother's face went pale. Then her jaw set with familiar determination. Call Detective Collins. Emma already had her phone in hand. Collins arrived within the hour, his face grim as he examined the photograph. Lucas is in federal prison, he said slowly. Maximum security. His communications are monitored. There's no way he sent this himself. But someone sent it for him, Emma replied. Someone on the outside. Collins nodded. The Harrington family had plenty of associates. People who benefited from their corruption. Some of them might be willing to do favors for Lucas, even now. What do? We increase security around your house. We trace this photograph's origin. We find whoever sent it, and we stop them. Collins met Emma's eyes with steady resolve. You exposed one of the most powerful crime families in Massachusetts. That makes you a hero. But it also makes you a target. Emma thought about running, about taking Grace and Mary and disappearing to somewhere Lucas's reach could never extend. But she had run before, metaphorically if not physically. She had spent years trying to hide from Lucas's anger, trying to make herself small enough that he wouldn't notice her. It had never worked. It had never kept her safe. I'm not running, Emma said. Her voice was quiet but firm. I spent 7 years letting that man control my life. I won't let him do it from a prison cell. Then we fight, Mary said, stepping up beside her daughter. Just like we did before. Emma looked at her mother, at this woman who had spent 30 years refusing to give up. She thought about everything they had survived together, everything they had built. She thought about Grace, sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware of the threat that had just entered their lives. I made a promise, Emma said slowly. When Grace was born, I promised that I would spend my whole life making sure no one ever hurts her. She straightened her shoulders. I intend to keep that promise. Collins was already making calls, arranging protection, beginning the investigation that would eventually identify the sender of the photograph. It would take months of work. There would be setbacks and dangers and moments when Emma wondered if she had the strength to continue. But she knew now what she hadn't known before. She knew that she was not alone. She had her mother, who had never stopped fighting. She had friends who had risked everything to help her. She had a community of survivors who understood her pain and shared her determination. And she had Grace, her daughter, her reason for everything. That night, after Collins left and Mary went to bed, Emma stood in the doorway of Grace's nursery and watched her daughter sleep. The baby's chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Her tiny fingers curled around the ear of a stuffed rabbit. She was perfect, innocent, unaware of the darkness that had preceded her birth or the shadows that still threatened. Emma crossed the room and sat in the rocking chair beside the crib. She reached through the bars and gently touched Grace's hand. "I fought for you once," Emma whispered. "I'll fight again, as many times as it takes, for as long as it takes, because you deserve a world without monsters. And I'm going to make sure you get it." Outside, the autumn wind rustled through the trees. Stars glittered in a clear, dark sky. Somewhere in the night, an enemy was watching, waiting, planning. But Emma was no longer the woman who cowered in fear. She was a mother, a survivor, a warrior, and she was just getting started. The story of Emma Harrington did not end on that autumn evening. It continued through months of investigation that eventually led to the arrest of 3 former Harrington associates who had been carrying out Lucas's campaign of intimidation from outside prison walls. It continued through legislative hearings, where Emma testified about the failures of systems that should have protected her, leading to reforms in how domestic violence cases were handled throughout Massachusetts. It continued through the growth of the Grace Fitzgerald Foundation, which expanded to 15 states and helped tens of thousands of survivors rebuild their lives. And it continued in the small moments that made up an ordinary life. Grace's first words, her first day of school, her first skinned knee and first lost tooth, and first time she looked at her mother and said, "I love you, Mommy," with complete innocent trust. Years later, when Grace was old enough to understand, Emma would tell her the full story about her father's cruelty and her grandmother's persistence and the night she was born in the middle of chaos and courage. Grace would listen with wide eyes, and then she would hug her mother tightly and say something that made Emma cry. "You're the bravest person I know." Emma would shake her head, wiping her tears. "I'm not brave. I was terrified every single day. I still get scared sometimes." Grace would look at her with Mary's eyes and Emma's determination. "That's what brave means," she would say, "being scared and doing the hard thing anyway." And Emma would hold her daughter close, feeling the warmth of a love that had survived fire and darkness and emerged stronger than before. This is my ending, Emma thought on those quiet evenings. Not with a happily ever after where all the pain disappears, but with something better, something real. A life built on the ashes of everything that tried to destroy me. She had survived a monster. She had raised a daughter. She had helped countless other women find their own strength. And that, Emma realized, was the true meaning of victory. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of hope. And that's the story of Emma Harrington, a woman who went from victim to survivor to warrior, a daughter who found a mother she thought had abandoned her, and a little girl named Grace who will grow up knowing that the women in her family never, ever give up. If this story touched your heart, if it made you cry, if it made you angry, if it gave you hope, then do me a small favor. Hit that like button. It tells me you want more stories like this one. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me which moment hit you the hardest. I read every single comment, and your words mean more than you know. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You never know who might be fighting their own battle in silence. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell, because there are more powerful stories coming, and I don't want you to miss a single one. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, no matter how dark it gets, we make our own light. Until next time.